I think most of us, on some intuitive level, would like to still persist in the belief that a person with a doctoral degree has actually done something of intellectual or academic value in order to earn that title. Well, prepare to be disabused of that quaint notion for all time, dear viewer, because here comes Raygun's doctoral thesis. But first, let's take a moment to call things what they are. I think this shit at the Olympics was a big, gigantic setup. This ridiculous, untalented grifter wanted to cash in on her proverbial Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame. She wasn't attempting to do an actual dance routine and did it badly. This is not a case of William Hung. William Hung had pure intentions and was too dumb to know he sucked. Raygun had 100% cynical intentions. She went in with the express purpose to make a mockery of herself, of Australia, of breakdancing, and indeed of the Olympic movement itself, so that she could attach herself like a barnacle to the hull of the SS pop culture and hopefully rake in some easy cash before the novelty wears off. Which is going to happen about 5 minutes from now, if indeed it hasn't already. But I do have to concede the possibility that this young woman's entire life has been an elaborate troll. That she set out 15 years ago with the intention of proving to the world that you can make yourself into an academic doctor and an Olympic athlete and a world-famous celebrity just by sucking at a thing. If that winds up being the case, well, it's the most brilliant troll in world history, but I don't think that possibility, frankly, is a very big one. And especially not after having read this doctoral thesis, which is a rather splendid example, I think, of 21st century academic writing, where you take concepts you could explain in 10 or 12 words and you blow them up into paragraph-length sentences containing every fashionable woke leftist catchphrase you've got in your bag. And if you're curious to check out the rest of Raygun's very formidable corpus of academic output, you can find it all on the Macquarie University website, link in description. So if you like this thesis, I'm sure you'll absolutely love papers with titles such as The Paradoxes of Breakdancing, Re-articulating Gender Norms Through Breakdancing, Nocturnal Paradox, How Breakdancing Reveals the Potentials of the Night, Dancing Away Distinction, Queering Hip-Hop Culture Through All-Style Battles, and of course, who can forget, Where the Hashtag B-Girl's At? Politics of Invisibility in Breaking Culture. Because you know you're dealing with very reputable, very high-quality academic literature when the titles of the papers include hashtags and sentences ending in prepositions. Very strong look indeed. Also, we're making a drinking game out of this, so you have to take a shot each time you hear the word autoethnographic. Is it a real word? Honestly, I don't know. But Raygun sure does like padding her sentences out with it, and you have to take 2 shots each time you hear the word deterritorialized. Again, don't know if it's a real word, though I tend to doubt it. And consider yourself forewarned that if you follow the rules of the game, you may perish from ethanol poisoning. I'm just saying. But most of all, as we read through the abstract and the first part of the introduction, and yeah, if you thought you were getting all 300 pages, I do hate to disappoint. I want you to just marvel at the fact that somebody was awarded an honest-to-God doctoral degree and became an actual university professor for writing this ridiculous, embarrassing load of cringe-inducing gobbledygook. And those eagle-eared viewers among you will not fail to notice that there is a grammatical error in the very first sentence of the abstract. And it ain't the last one either. Because that's where we are now in Western academia, ladies and gentlemen. Sad as it is. Okay, Jim Eagle, hit the damn music and let's do this thing. Begin quote. Title: Deterritorializing Gender in Sydney's Breakdancing Scene, a B-Girl's Experience of B-Boying, by Rachel Louise Gunn, B.A., Macquarie University, 2009. Abstract! This thesis critically interrogates how masculinist practices of breakdancing offers a site for transgression of gendered norms. Drawing on my own experiences as a female within the male-dominated breakdancing scene in Sydney, first as a spectator, then as an active crew member, this thesis questions why so few female participants engage in this creative space, and how breakdancing might be a space to displace and deterritorialize gender. I use analytic autoethnography and interviews with scene members in collaboration with theoretical frameworks offered by Deleuze and Guattari, Butler, Bordeaux, and other feminist and post-structuralist philosophers to critically examine how the capacities of bodies are constituted and shaped in Sydney's breakdancing scene, and also to locate the potentiality for moments of transgression. In other words, I conceptualized the breaking body as not a body constituted through regulations and assumptions, but as an assemblage open to new rhizomatic connections. Breaking is a space that embraces difference, whereby the rituals of the dance not only augment its capacity to deterritorialize the body, but also facilitate new possibilities for performativities beyond the confines of dominant modes of thought and normative gender construction. Consequently, this thesis attempts to contribute to what I perceive as a significant gap in scholarship on hip-hop, breakdancing, and autoethnographic explorations of Deleuze's Guattarian theory. Introduction. Where it all began. This thesis came out of my foray into the male-dominated breakdancing world, first as a spectator, then as an active breakdancer, crew member, and competitor. I want to begin by contextualizing, in an autoethnographic manner, the questions firstly about gender and identity that were raised through my own experience, but then grew into bigger questions about the possibilities to displace gendered identities that led me to begin this research project. I was first introduced to breakdancing in 2008 through attending my boyfriend Sam's crew training sessions. While I have always loved dance and have learnt a range of different styles over the years, including ballet, jazz, tap, ballroom, and salsa, I was wary of learning breakdancing. My boyfriend's crew was all male, and the only girls present were sidelined as girlfriends or sisters of the crew members. There was no place for girls to experiment with new steps, but I was curious to see how my body would respond to the moves my male friends could so effortlessly perform. Although extremely shy and overwhelmed at the prospect of learning any steps in front of them, I felt a desire to connect to the dissident flavor of the crew and challenge the space where girls felt they could not enter. In 2011, I attended my first breakdancing, or as I soon learned to call it, b-boying competition. This event was outshadowed by male competitors, and yet all the previous dance styles I had learnt were female-dominated. I had grown up in a dance school where boys were the unusual ones. Why, then, weren't there more female breakdancers? This observation led me to start to critically reflect on the gender disparity within the scene, my desires to join this openly masculine space, and my assumptions about dance participation. Through all of this, my one question was, why are there so few female breakdancers? It was at this event that I saw female breakdancers, or B-girls, for the first time. Though by this stage I was aware that women did breakdance, they seemed almost mythological to me, having never actually seen one. And yet here they were, competing, laughing, and talking to everyone just like their male peers were. While the 100 or so male breakdancers at the event vastly outnumbered them, these women were neither excluded nor discouraged. Quite the opposite, in fact. They were welcomed and warmly supported without any hesitation. From these experiences, I was left with questioning. If the scene was so supportive and inclusive, and it was a dance-based scene after all, why didn't more women breakdance? And this is the question I want to address in this thesis. Before I embarked on any research, my answer to this question was an assumption about gender. When faced with the notion of who a breakdancer was to me, I immediately thought of a male body, a tall, strong, athletic young man. In other words, a b-boy. In addition to this projected image, my initial assumptions were that women weren't breakdancing because of physical limitations. This could be due to the strength demanded, the confrontational nature of competitions, and overall because the dance style was highly masculine. This was, after all, what initially discouraged me from wanting to learn. From what I saw in Sam's training sessions and at my first competition, breakdancing was much more aggressive than any other style of dance that I had encountered. Competitions, or battles as they are more often called in the scene, are intensely confrontational and also improvisational, unlike my overly rehearsed childhood routines to saccharine songs that I performed at end-of-year concerts. These breakdancers instantly responded to the funk music in a frenzy of spontaneous movements. As the battles increased in intensity, the space of the dance floor would contract as the breakdancers were drawn to one another, closing in on themselves. I was amazed at the technicality of their movements, their self-confidence, their strength and vigor, their speed and accuracy. There was intensity in the interactions between those participating in the battle, with them often shouting insults and laughing at their opponents until they made a mistake. But once the battle ended, they all shook hands, smiling and laughing, reveling in their collective success. As I met more B-girls through competitions, I came to realize my initial assumptions were unfounded. Women could breakdance and compete. So again, the question that haunted me was, why are there so few B-girls? Why did so few girls feel this dance was open to them? I began to critically reflect on my early assumptions about breakdancing. Why did I assume that it was a dance style more suited to men? Why did I assume that I couldn't, or even shouldn't, learn the dance style? And where did these assumptions come from? The aim of this thesis is to test these assumptions about breakdancing. I do this through interweaving autoethnographic research, which draws on my own experiences and observations of Sydney's breakdancing scene and interviews with scene members with cultural theory. Specifically, utilizing the theory of Deleuze and Guattari, Butler, Bordeaux, Guettin, and Colebrook enables an in-depth examination of the gendered codes and conventions of Sydney's breakdancing scene. These theorists provide the tools to examine how bodily capacities are constituted in this space and what possibilities there are to deterritorialize gender. That is, to decode and displace the stronghold of limiting identity categories, and I will elaborate on this term further below. Importantly, I will not be providing an exposition of the work of these theorists. Rather, I am using them to understand how gender operates in the scene and to also underpin my cultural analysis of breakdancing. The argument and cultural analysis is built on my autoethnography, which in turn narratively unfolds from my early foray into breakdancing through my competing as a breakdancer to my questioning of its masculinist assumptions about the body. That is, interweaving thorough and supporting and informing my experience and my autoethnographic approach is a cultural analysis using the works of philosophers and theorists mentioned above. In attempting to bring these two methodological frameworks together in this way, my aim is to illustrate my own developing experiences and unfolding conceptualizations of the scene. Indeed, as I moved through the scene and continued to extend my use of cultural theory, I explored different ways to challenge the limiting gendered assumptions that plagued bodily expression, and instead moved toward examining the creativity of breaking as a way to deterritorialize gender. I do not explore this latter argument until Chapter 6, as the argument only developed after years of training and competing. Indeed, through this research process, I came to understand that deterritorializations could only happen once I learnt the requisite moves, codes, and conventions of Sydney's breakdancing scene. Consequently, this is why my autoethnographic experiences appear in the thesis in the way they do, situated alongside the cultural theory and building as the thesis develops, thus supporting the parallel genealogies of my foray into this scene and research process. In combining these two methodologies in this way, I also attempt to call attention to different ways of writing and thinking. This manifests through shifting between first and third person writing, and this is a conscious attempt to undermine the binary between autoethnography and theory. While I discuss my critical framework and methodology in much greater detail in the following chapter, I want to briefly introduce my theoretical approach here. This is because my critical framework not only helped me to make sense of my assumptions and experiences in Sydney's breakdancing scene, but also provided the means to elucidate my argument that I explore in this thesis, that breakdancing can lead to potential opportunities, displacements, and reconstitutions of gender. Analyzing gender, the premise needed for a working understanding of the body and gender and the possibilities to reconfigure them is required before any cultural discussion can take place. As such, to fully develop this study of female participation in the Sydney breakdancing scene, This thesis will take into account the cultural construction of bodies and acknowledge that even when taking part in a leisure activity such as dance, participants are beholden to socio-cultural assumptions that regulate their corporeal capacity. The production of the gendered body is merely one such control of the corporeal. Social expectations disguised as biological assumptions have a material effect on corporeal possibility and expression. For example, Judith Butler and Pierre Bourdieu have in common an understanding of the body as not natural, but as constituted through its environment. Here, bodily techniques, performances, and habits are the product of historical directives, imposed social roles, and even the specific conditions of a cultural milieu. For Butler, this understanding takes shape through her theory of performativity, where she views the stylization of the body and the ritualized repetition as producing, quote, the illusion of an abiding gendered self. Using performativity to examine Sydney's breakdancing scene enables an analysis of how the body's performance is not only regulated in line with broader gender norms, but also, and in doing so, becomes naturalized. To further enrich this understanding of the gendered breakdancing body, I employ Bourdieu's concept of habitus. This concept productively highlights how dispositions, habits, and gestures are both regulated and regular, but without any strict obedience to rules. Indeed, habitus encompasses the principles which generate and organize practices and representations, though ones that are at the same time adaptable and without a conscious directive. The fusing of performativity and habitus in this thesis enables a critical examination of not only what bodily techniques are repeated in Sydney's breakdancing scene, but also what their repetition may reproduce. In other words, the broader consequences of their repetition in reinforcing existing structures and also naturalizing ethics. All right, you had enough yet? Anyway, it goes on like that for another 284 pages, single-spaced. And I'm not even talking about the appendices and the bibliography and the footnotes and all that stuff. The actual prose section goes on for another 284 pages, and it doesn't get any better. But I think this has been an instructive exercise because just as you sometimes need to stare directly into the sun in order to experience having two burned out retinas and a lifetime of total blindness, sometimes you need to stare directly at a doctoral thesis to understand the dreadful state of higher education here in the age of woke. That's it for me. See you Sunday. Blast Radius 8 Eastern 5 Pacific. Be there or else I will make you listen to the other 284 pages, and nobody wants that. Have a great day and a pleasant for tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.